go. We got it, right? Oh no, let's hack it. Hopefully it has game? Game, are you okay? Oh, it's okay, it's fine. So we can get some that'll be quite helpful. Oh, this is bad. Well, like that.
Welcome to the circus!
Ignore the lies of Atlas and his parasites. Rapture is on the rise.
Take the elevator to confront Fontaine. Director's commentary. Nice. Maybe it's time to use some of the explosives. Blowing the hell up. I never really used it. Maybe now is the time. To the end, I might have I don't know. Heat-seeking RPGs for $25 takes 2 distilled water, 1 kerosene, 1 tube. Also make anti-personnel pistol rounds, electric gel. I max out on napalm, liquid nitrogen. Not electric gel. You know what? We'll just do this. Armor piercing. Okay. Oh, we don't need any more of that now. Alright, now we have so much exploding bad. Signal repulsion. Can I call another? Let's take everything from here from city mines. Bro, at least put me where I actually am. Who the hell is making that noise? Bye. Even I can't carry any more empty. I use all of I want to make more, but there's an achievement to this one. That's what I'm having.
Ignore the lies of Atlas and his parasites. Rapture is on the rise.
Because I should be like, yeah, down here. See, I'm really here actually. Nope, they will not come. Okay, where is this subject one? Proving ground. Let's just there is this entire area. Most definitely can.
What's the matter, Frank? It's been sitting here, Jim. Every day there's less and less. You know the problem's not in your head. It's in your genes. Hey, I don't go in for all that splicing stuff. My buddy is not insane. Shows you what your buddy knows. Go over to Genetic Horizons for a trial of fresh air. Fresh air not only gives you a full head of thick hair, but it's 100%.
The electric bump. I ever need. Enough electric bump. And everyone. Including Mr. Fontaine. I don't think he's gonna stand up.
Welcome. And 100% safe. It's time for me to get a little fresh air.
daddy. Gotta be so fucking daddy. That is rubber to daddy. How am I even able to do this? I guess I learned. I guess I had ice muscle to be able to do it. Not like whatever. Not have the knowledge. Artists should not use. A lot of the things they say make sense, but the way they implement it does not. Achievements here. You'll see there is one to acquire all upgrades for all weapons. We don't have that yet. Hardest difficulty, jackpot, audio diaries. This I'll get as well. This one, successfully invent at least 100 items. That's like one of the last ones I think left in the main game. I think there are DLC or something after that. I mean, I left it a lot of items. Lot of like
I trimmed the fresh hair, then came up to see Steinman. Ladies will be knocking at my door.
None of that regulation stuff. Always slows me down.
A rocket.
The eggs are in the scramble. Ryan will be taking down Fontaine. Or Fontaine will be taking down Ryan. Security Chief Sullivan. Never met him. Or maybe we heard a audio, right?
I remember when me and the crowd put you in that sub. You were no more than 2. You were my ace in the hole.
No beta chambers. If you die,
But you
must
were
continue
also the
progress.
closest thing I ever had to a son. And that's why this hurts. Betrayal, kid. Life ain't strictly business.
Oh, that's a cool. Oh, saving content. Okay, well, if you're saving content, right? That's fine. If you don't mind, I'll check on it. Those are all flagging up, huh? Contain that.
Go! Go now! Hit him with the needle!
Okay. Guess I'll get into the lead then. Rain at him.
You think you got a shot at this? I'm barely getting started.
Yeah, I think you're like half that.
You think I'm alone in this world? I got more than enough mobs to watch my back while I recharge.
Come and get it,
Bro, run! Why won't you run?
catch my breath. And I'm gonna bury you and all them little eggs.
Alright, give me a second. Get ready. Okay, we have more explosives, right? Yeah.
Need a minute. I'm gonna cut you into bits.
Yeah?
I had you built. I sent you topside. I called you back, showed you what you was capable of. Even that life you thought you had, that was something I dreamed up and had tattooed inside your head. Now, if you don't call that family, I don't know what is. And now,
Little sister saved me. Nice. Complete the game. What is that?
They offered you this city, and you refused it. And what did you do instead? What I've come to expect of you. You saved them. You gave them the one thing that was stolen from them. A chance. A chance to learn,
Aren't they immortal though?
to find love, to live. And in the end, what was your reward? You never said, but I think I know. A family.
Okay, I will see it. We'll land the clan, like, we're gonna fight this guy. I was like, we're gonna do all that, right? Then we say, the upgrade section, I must have. I think I needed one upgrade at the end. Pretty sure I missed the power to the station. Oh well, yeah, not gonna. I could look it up and see what it is. I don't know. skip the credits. Alright, well. Anyway, welcome to Bioshock Challenges. Please note that while this is a Bioshock product, it is not meant to extend the Bioshock story or connect to the narrative events of the main game. It's a separate product, intended to be enjoyed on its own merits. We do recommend that you play Bioshock first to gain familiarity with the game interface system. These challenges require a mix of puzzle solving, exploration, and combat experimentation. Each provide a different kind of experience. We hope you enjoy them. Bioshock Challenges. The Iron Team, no weapons and no damage dealing plasmids, find a way to defeat a big daddy rest of the whole system. Save little is trapped at the top of a malfunctioning Ferris wheel. The save little sister choose from a wide variety of tools having strategies in a set of combat arenas. Alright. Then we have this, making Rapture real behind the pitch, deeper shooter, creative process, completed, reality check. Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna go through all of those obviously. Maybe I would later, but nah, not right now. We also have a museum. But yeah, I thought there would be like one more level. They defeat Atlas, and then there's a little bit more. Museum of Orphan Concepts, a guided tour of the ideas that irrational games discarded or revoked heavily during the making of the original Bioshock game. Look at this. They have cannons. Oh, they shoot like cannonballs, huh? They have like multiple guns and shit. Oh. Exhibit. Soul Profum. Irrational Intent's name for this prototype Big Daddy variant, who mauled players with an enormous hook and fired iron bearings from a barrel, stood for slow projectile / effed up melee. He survived long enough to become a fully functional AI, but the team eventually cut him to focus on polishing the other Big Daddy types. This model later appeared in Bioshock 2 as the Rumbler, throwing miniature turrets instead of cannonballs. Alright, this is gonna come again then. Exhibit. Early Bouncer. This original model for the Bouncer type of Big Daddy featured a flat-headed drill at the end of each arm. The Big Daddies were envisioned as the builders of Rapture, with weapons modified from tools they would have used in its construction. When the Gatherers were reimagined as little sisters, one of the Bouncer's drills was changed to a gloved hand so the two characters could interact with each other. Alright. This is nice, you know. People who really like the game, which I did. What is this? Exhibit. Forest concept art. Irrational artists tried to envision how an underwater city would actually function in this early conceptual work of Rapture. One idea imagined a thick forest for the purpose of oxygen exchange, seen here with an observation catwalk running around the edge. The concept of using trees for oxygen exchange made it to the final game in the Arcadia level. Yeah. The bugs. We never saw these. The Gatherer. It may be hard to imagine that this creature, whose job it was to reclaim Adam from corpses around Rapture, was the earliest iteration of the idea behind the Little Sister. Since the Gatherer generated absolutely no sympathy from players, the team experimented with the concepts of featuring a number of animals, including the infamous dog in a wheelchair. What? And later a grotesque miniature humanoid. Finally, a concept sketch of a deformed child inspired the Eureka moment responsible for the Little Sisters. I mean, I never saw these. I guess they were not implemented. But yeah, I would probably kill these. Oh, they look bad, I know, but you know. Whoa. Ranged aggressor. Shoots like a shotgun. Stitchy. The first spice-led irrational creator for Bioshock, Stitchy, was used in many early concept demos and was fully functional in-game with kinematics, hit reactions, and voiceover. It took us that long to realize that he wasn't a good model, said lead artist Sean Robertson. This is probably the worst abortion that Irrational has ever made. Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty cool. You would kind of fit, but not really, I guess. Whoa. Early splicer concept art. These are some of the first concept sketches to show the Bioshock enemies moving in a more human-like direction. Artists coupled that approach with the idea that Adam deformed the body in a way that related to its intended function. For instance, a giant grotesque arm on a melee enemy. And then a gun in one hand. Yeah, I mean, they went to much more humanoid. I think most splicers were just humans with slight differences, right? These are some of the first concepts which is to show Bioshock enemies moving in a more human-like direction. Grotesque arm on a melee enemy, yeah. Or just like gun, big canister, I don't know what for. Pre-arm hand. Before solidifying the fiction around Adam, Irrational experimented with the idea of it being an external injected substance. Here you can see us playing around with Adam being mechanically injected, said lead artist Sean Robertson. So this Splicer's got vials of it on his belt. This model was created but never made it into the game in any form. Okay, so like Venom from the Batman universe, right? I would inject it instead. Interesting. The hell? Rifleman. Moving from grotesque human was a grotesque human was a slow process. While early concepts saw the melee enemies grow monstrous arms, the team had trouble conveying how someone who had spliced to become a marksman would appear. Early Big Daddy. These are early concepts of a rosy type of Big Daddy who, like the bouncer, was envisioned as a construction worker who had been repurposed for a protector of the gatherers. Alright, in the diving suit. The diving suit was always there, I guess. Rosy. Okay, so this is the color. Protector concept art. The Big Daddies, originally called protectors, were envisioned as dive-suited construction workers, re-tasked with the defense of atom gatherers. They used construction tools or improvised weapons that looked like they had been found on the seafloor. From left to right are early concepts for the melee ranged and slow projectile. This guy is the melee one. Right, with the big hook. I see. And this is the ranged, and this is the slow projectile. I mean, the cannonball ones. Oh, they have a thing on the back, I guess. So yeah, they're supposed to be construction workers, but then they were like, they're actually custom made in the real game, right? The hell? That's all grayed out. They haven't developed that yet. Grenadier Splicer. This grey elephantine splicer was an early grenadier from the same period of development as Stitchy and Hooker. He was a guy who spliced to carry around giant grenades and throw them at you, says lead artist Sean Robertson. The model was built and textured but never animated. Yeah, that would have been pretty bad. I mean, I guess we had the Nitro Splicer instead, but he was a more like, he carried like a grenade box, right? Whoa. Environmental study. The location depicted here was built for the vision demo of Bioshock, a small level demonstrating several of the key elements of the game, such as the Big Daddies and Gatherers. It looks pretty cool. With the cage, they changed a bit, I guess, obviously. It doesn't look as clean as it does here. Neptune's bounty concept art. This area appears in Neptune bounty level of Bioshock, but the bodies floating in the ocean were cut late in development when their cast shadows proved too distracting from the action in the room. Yes, well, I mean, nowadays you would have it. This is just a spider splicer, man. Hooker. Created around the same time as Stitchy and the Grenadier, the splicer was dubbed the Hooker because of her weapon of choice. This concept evolved into the spider splicer, which that when it was decided the splicer models could fit any behavior role, and the Hooker model became later the Baby Jane splicer. What I mean? Sure. What's up here? Big Daddy concept art. Yeah, the two drills, I guess. This early concept depicting a Big Daddy bursting through a wall, which inspired the audio log in the Big Daddy training grounds about a rogue Big Daddy. The player that encountered him at the end of the level. I did not get that audio log, by the way. The hell? I missed a big area, I think. Exhibit Sub Bay concept art. This is a concept sketch depicting what later becomes Submarine Bay, an area which housed an important scene of Atlas. Yep, I remember. That's a big guy. Missing link model. This character is essentially the missing link between the grotesque early designs and human splices that appear in Bioshock. This is the last bad model we did before moving on to what actually went into the shipping game, said lead artist Sean Robertson. After playing with him for a while, we just said, why not we use humans instead? I always thought of these as Scooby-Doo monsters because they were too inhuman to evoke empathy. I mean, yeah, big gun. I mean, they use the same kind of guns. Whoa, slime from slug, blood inside of glass ports, tarnished brass. Early Big Daddy concept art. This was the fourth protector concept originally created with an organic slug attached to it. A model was started but never completed as the team narrowed their focus to 3 and finally just 2 Big Daddy types. I still like this as a protector, said artist Rob Waters. We started modeling and I really pushed to get it in even as just a static model on the floor, but we never made it. I mean, yeah, the slugs were removed, right, entirely. Whoa. Early creature concepts. These are some of the earliest pieces done for Bioshock, back when Irrational was still working on SWAT 4. The only concrete ideas at that point were an undersea city and biological experimentation, so early concepts focused on those themes. Yeah, I mean, those are scary looking monsters. Like this one. Yam Hand model. This character derisively called Yam Hand around Irrational Games was the poster child of the conceptual phase that preceded the decision to go with human enemies. I'd point out the drawings behind the model, said lead artist Sean Robertson. You can see the top one got built, but the other two informed the design as well. As we got trendier and more towards humanoids, the Scooby monsters got goofier and less scary. I mean, yeah. Interesting. You could have like a separate area with these guys, I guess, if you wanted to. Iconic Rapture concepts. So the first image that really captured all visual elements that made Bioshock Bioshock. A large view of the ocean, aquatic lighting scene, and the elegant art deco design elements. Without this image, Bioshock would have been a radically different beast. I mean, this looks much better. Like it, yeah. The Art Deco elements, the weird designs that they have, it looks pretty cool. It's like a level design. Fleet Hall concept art. The early concept for Sander Cohen's Fleet Hall was created after level building had begun, when the designers found they were having difficulty conceptualizing the theater space. It was one of the earliest spaces built for Bioshock, and many of the assets used in the museum come from that area. Hanging sea life. Not as much as a cut concept as an Easter egg for observant museum visitors. These sea creatures can be seen swimming past players' view during the bathysphere ride down to Rapture's Bioshock opening sequence. Really? Oh, I did not notice another one, but big squid, the giant whale. Alright. Interesting. Well, I mean, I think I should.
Hey, I'm Jeff Keighley here in Boston to go behind the scenes to hear some untold stories about the making of Bioshock with Ken Levine and Sean Robertson.
How long have you like 40 minutes long. Watch it.
Let's talk a bit about the theme and setting of Bioshock Rapture. I think a lot of people, when they played the game for the first time, Ken, they wondered, how did you even dream up this place? And I know you said publicly before that part of the reason you sort of, what led you to Rapture was this idea of fully simulating a place. Tell us about that sort of idea and the frustrations you had with other games where you sort of hit a bound.
I think our philosophy was always to do what we were doing 100% rather than try to do something bigger and do it 50% or 40%. So one of the ideas of, and this sort of came from System Shock 2 as well, where you focus on an area that you can really bring to life and you kind of eliminate the questions of, well, why can't I go over the bridge to New Jersey? So we were able to really make a place, I think, that felt believable and real, even though in actuality it was really quite limited. But we just sort of dressed it with all these buildings outside that were all, that were all basically glorified fakes. We let the story drive what we needed to show rather than some kind of like predetermined map which we set down, which is a little different than like System Shock 2, where we actually mapped a spaceship out deck by deck. Yeah. Because I don't know what the philosophy felt a little different there, because you want to feel like a real spaceship that was sort of stacked on top of each other. But Rapture was free to sprawl across the ocean floor.
Although you guys originally, Sean, were talking about doing this game on a sort of spaceship again, right?
Yeah, when we first started talking about what the spiritual successor to System Shock 2 is going to be, Spaceship came up, but again, we wanted a limited environment, and we didn't necessarily want to do Spaceship again. And our first actual exploration of this space was underwater, but ultimately ended up looking like a spaceship. It just happened to have a couple of seaweed fronds outside. And that started to push us towards what artistic statement that we wanted to make this look different, and what rules we were going to set for the world. How at every turn we were going to try to remind the player that they were in fact underwater and that this wasn't a spaceship.
And how, like, underwater, we obviously know you did underwater, then sitting in the sky, like where did you come with the idea of like doing this underwater?
I think there was probably a conversation. It's like, well, what kind of places could be cut off from other places? Yeah. Like, well, spaceship, summer camp, any island notion, right? Something that's cut off from the rest of the world. Yeah. So you never felt like you should be able to go over that bridge to New Jersey.
I don't want to apply some deep and meaningful conversation. I think it was one of those ideas that you just kind of say, and then everybody's, that sounds cool. Let's try that. Let's go for it.
And I think it lended itself to having very nice views out the window without having to build an insane amount of unique assets.
Right.
By today's standards, we still were a small team back then. And there's an expectation that because you're underwater, the view distances are going to be short, so you can really kind of fade out into the fog at a short distance and not have the expectation that, why can't I see forever? So there's a lot of limitations in a good way that we put on ourselves by being underwater, as opposed to, like, if you're on a cruise ship, then you'd expect to see across the water, and we'd have to deal with that. Same thing with an island.
Or on a city in the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was a lot more complicated, yeah.
So you came up with the idea of, let's do this underwater, let's do this sort of isolated place. Then you had to answer the question of, why would someone build this? Is that sort of how it worked, sort of order of operations? You then had to come up with a story to explain?
Yeah, I think we wanted a very believable reason why they'd be there. And sort of the necessary isolation of the place sort of led to, well, what kind of person would want to do this? And I wasn't even particularly aware of the sort of political implications of what I was reading, but I've been reading, I had read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and I mostly thought it was an interesting story. Like, I didn't realize that people were sort of basing their sort of political lives around it, because I wasn't that tuned in to that stuff at that point. And so, but I love the dialogue and the kind of speechifying in it, because you can see a video game character speaking with that kind of certainty and that kind of confident philosophy. It just seemed like a natural kind of thing to apply to this place. And so it just sort of all came together as a sort of who is the guy who would do this? Well, you know, that character. He was sort of this amalgamation of characters from Ayn Rand's books and Ayn Rand herself. This sort of idealistic person who says, well, the only way to do this is to separate from the rest of the world. And that led to Andrew Ryan.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone.
We knew from a technical standpoint that we wanted isolation. We also knew to sell it, we needed a compelling storyline, a backstory that why would this place exist? Otherwise, how are we going to make Rapture feel like it's lived in if we don't have the reason for it to be there? So once we decided on the underwater location and then the closed off spaces, that objectivist story kind of came in and made the art stronger and made the level design stronger, because we could feed back into that loop.
And I think that's why we had to have sort of Andrew Ryan's pitch right at the beginning of the game. We wanted people to understand why somebody would go there. And so he makes this very personal one-to-one pitch to the gamer, but also that was the pitch he'd make to people, which was, you know, there's a place that you can be free of all these things, where you can not be sort of put upon by the government and not be afraid of nuclear war and not be afraid of all these other things that will plague you on the surface. We wanted that pitch to sort of resonate and make sense, because that's, otherwise by the time you got there you'd be like, well, this place is just fantasy, nobody would ever come here. And that the beauty of the place also was also tied into that. It had to be a very attractive proposition, or people who would believe that people would go leave their lives and go to the bottom of the ocean.
I'm sure in some ways you had to convince the team and enroll them in your sort of vision of, you know, who this character was going to be and what the setting was going to be. How did that work, Sean? I mean, did Ken come in and say, hey, I've been reading these books, and I think we could sort of...
I believe he just came in one day on a horse and said, Ayn Rand, everybody read The Fountainhead.
Exactly. I bought 30 copies of
Yeah, I think, you know...
Here's a 2,000-page book or something.
Yeah.
Go read it.
I mean, really, it was more organic. You know, like I said, we knew that we had this location, and you struggle to fill it with stories, and you struggle to find meaning of why does this place exist? You know, what's my motivation? And as Ken started to explore Ayn Rand a little more and started talking to us about it, and we were having that conversation, and it's like, oh, this could totally work. Like, this is exciting. Like, this is something that really hasn't been done in a video game before. And if we had flipped it and come up with the idea first before the location, I don't think we would have really been that excited about it. But we had a location, and now we're trying to fill it with that story, and because of the order of operation there, you start to get excited, like, oh, I could totally make this work. This is going to really make it feel like a lived-in space.
You know, as you think of sort of the, you know, the setting, and you think of maybe a character or something, was there a moment that you think back, it's like, oh, like right then and there, like I got excited when you attached the Ayn Rand
For me,
stuff
it was
to
going to Rockefeller Center and seeing the visual. So I told this story before, but my wife and I were in New York, and we went to Rockefeller Center, which was, if you go to Rockefeller Center, it basically looks exactly like Rapture. It's because every building, you're sort of encircled. It's this block in New York, or a couple of blocks in New York, where Radio City Music Hall is, and where 30 Rockefeller Plazas, where you see that show 30 Rock, and the ice skating rink, and where they put the Christmas tree, and it's this very iconic location. But what's cool about it, it's all one, unlike the rest of the city. Everywhere you look, it's one architectural style. It's Art Deco, and it's very iconic Art Deco. And my wife and I were there, and we were sort of working on the game, and we didn't have a visual style. And all of a sudden, I started looking around, and I said, "Oh, this could be a visual for the game." Also, the geometry of it was actually quite conducive to making a video game because it wasn't overly complicated geometry. Art Deco is quite
bold and simple,
bold and geometric, yeah, and simple. And so my wife and I bought a couple of tourist cameras before iPhone cameras, you know.
Throwaway cameras, yeah.
Yeah, throwaway cameras with little Kodak things, and we just started photographing doorknobs and light fixtures, and just sort of developed the photos. Remember that? Brought them in and said,
"Come to the office. Here's a stack of stuff,
Here's a
Sean.
stack of photos.
Take a look."
I'll see you guys in a couple of years. Go make this.
Where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
So you had kind of a theme, you came up with an art style, some of the iconic characters, and then, you really had to build the narrative around it. And you've talked about, a lot of the themes in the game and, greed, jealousy, sex, violence, all the things that sort of, drive us or what destroy us. And that was something I think that, as you thought about the story of the game, you wanted to, I'm sure, reflect some of those, right? Because I think people love the characters that sort of flawed in a way, and this is a world which is its own little microcosm, but had a lot of tension inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, the character of Ryan was sort of, he's basically invisible through most of the game, right? Except for a very small portion. But he's very present because the city is him, right? It's such a representation of him. We never wanted to cut away to a cutscene where you saw Andrew Ryan, planning and scheming. We wanted him to be very present without actually being present. But once you had Ryan, and once you had his desire to protect this vision of his, you just had to then come up with the characters who'd be arrayed in opposition to him. So we had this character, the Big Daddy, and then eventually the character of the Little Sister. And so characters like Tenenbaum came along, like, here's a person who's in opposition to him for this reason. And then you have, for more noble reasons. And then you have a character like Atlas, who's much more cynical opposition. Once we had all those characters arrayed, we're like, well, who are you? And, you ended up being a sort of, a pawn in the middle of all this opposition to Ryan. We just kept kind of homing in on that theme and making sure that you weren't, eventually figuring out that you couldn't just be here by an accident, that you're an integral part of this story, even though you don't know you're an integral part of this story. You think you're just there by happenstance.
Look, Mr. Bubbles, it's an angel. I can see light coming from his belly. Wait a minute, he's still breathing. It's all right. I know he'll be an angel soon.
No, but I did not die. Alright, well, that was extremely long, and maybe we'll see more of those later. But I mean, I want to do the additional content, so I'm not going to 3, because there are achievements for these as well. This, that'll probably give me achievements I've left. So upgrade all weapons is there. Seriously good at this. I mean, nobody cares. This one I wanted to get, but I guess no. Now you can see it in achievements, right? Just click on view. There you can see it. Here, like I didn't get this, I did not get irony. I did not find Cohen through being a good one. Because I believe because I killed Cohen, I couldn't find the root. So that's why this achievement was not accessible for me. And then, okay, great, all of this. Yes, rescue little sister, 9 team. Now man chooses. Rescue little sister and shock ton of events. Found all collectible roses. Using only plasmids, turning the range research camera on medium or higher field. All collectible roses. It is all about the side missions, except a couple like brass balls or man chooses. Might look some of them up, but anyway, for now, that's good enough. Try to give this game a rating now, I'm only sure because the additional content is there. But with just that much, I mean, by the time it was released, it was probably 10 out of 10, right? But now, it's showing its age a little bit. Still, the story is great, the remaster works, it looks pretty enough. But still, the graphics not perfect. But they don't have to be, really. So if I had to give the game a rating, I'd say like a 9. you know, it's showing its age. Age is against it, obviously, but still, story is still solid. Gameplay is solid. It could be like a little. Like, I thought really the ending fight was a little short. I guess maybe because I had amazing weaponry and stuff. Who knows? But and you know, maybe if I had started murdering all the child instead of saving them, maybe the ending would have been a little different. Who knows? Because I would have much more Adam. That's all. I think like one more level after that will like escape. Would have been cool. Like just to wrap things up, I would have put it at 9.5 even like base standards, but I think a 9 is good. The ending was I mean, the ending explained things well. We got out, we lived our life, we got a family. That's cool. But like, I'm not talking about the ending of the game. The ending of the game was fine. The ending of like actual the gameplay felt kind of weak. Like, I was getting more Adam. I think I was building up to this big fight, and then after that, like the finale, right? But I guess whatever. Fighting Atlas was the finale. That's fine. It's not bad. Obviously, I'm trying to critique it, but really, again, 9 out of 10 is not bad. It's a really good game. The ending also is really strong. Going through it. I mean, I'm a little sad I missed the last bout of the Red People Station, but that's probably because I missed going through because I murdered Cohen. I should not have done that. You know, and sometimes, you know, what can you do, right? But I didn't know about that. I thought killing him was like the hard thing to do, and I did that because I wanted the toxin in that. Maybe it was the more obvious thing to do, though. Oh well, you could kill him later, by the way, because he would pop up, I believe, in his own apartment. You could kill him, take his keys, steal his entire room stuff, and then go back and get the toxin and everything. But whatever, so be it. I'll see you in the next time. I'll do the additional content. If additional content is really good, if it is actually good, I'll give it a 9.5. Or if it is fine, I'll give it a 9. Or if it is actually abhorrent, I'll I can go down. But no. Because it gives additional content, I mean, that's a little extra. The museum as well was a nice touch. And the developer's commentary, and if you want like a really wrapping up the game, then you can do that. Credits again. Yeah, anyway. See you in the next one. Finish up the additional content, then move on to Bioshock 2, which is newer, should be better. Let's see if it gets a 10 from me. Well, we'll see.